They say you should never sleep with your boss. I laughed at that once until the night I woke up tangled in his sheets, his breath still warm on my neck, and my career dangling by a thread. The funny part, I never thought I would be the kind of guy who'd lose everything over a single moment of weakness. But here I am, in America's corporate jungle, where secrets cost more than money, and mine just happens to have the face of the man who signs my paychecks. I wasn't supposed to fall for him. Hell, I wasn't even supposed to notice the way his hand lingered a second too long on my shoulder, or how his voice lowered when he said my name in the office like it belonged to him. But fate has a twisted sense of humor, and it came crashing down on me the night the elevator broke, leaving us trapped between the 27th and 28th floor with nothing but silence, whiskey from his briefcase, and confessions I never thought I'd hear. That was the beginning of my undoing. His name is Alexander Hayes, 32, the kind of man who could silence a room by just walking in. He's all sharp edges and expensive cologne. The perfect picture of a man who has it all except maybe the softness he hides behind those steel gray eyes. And then there's me, Ethan Miller, 26, a man still figuring out who the hell he is while trying not to trip over my own shoelaces in the world of mergers and acquisitions. The night it happened, I told myself it was just alcohol, just tension, just two lonely souls colliding in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the truth, I remember every detail. The way his lips tasted faintly of bourbon and recklessness. The way his hand slid behind my neck, pulling me in as though he'd been waiting for years. And the way he whispered against my skin like a promise, like a threat. You're not walking out of here the same, Ethan. He was right. I didn't. Monday morning came, and suddenly I wasn't just the assistant with neatly pressed shirts and too much coffee. I was the man who had seen Alexander Hayes undone his tie on the floor, his laugh unguarded, his walls shattered for just one night. But at work, he wore his armor again. Cold, precise, untouchable. Only, every time our eyes met across the boardroom table, I felt it had electric current, the memory of his breath against my ear. And worse, I knew he felt it too. The cruel irony. No one else could know. Not in an office where whispers travel faster than emails and where the wrong rumor could destroy both of us. So we played a dangerous game, pretending, denying, stealing glances that burned hotter than fire. And yet, with every passing day, I could feel the night dragging us back, like a tide neither of us could fight. It wasn't love at first sight. No. Love is too gentle a word for what this was. This was chaos wrapped in a tailored suit. This was two men caught in a storm of want and fear, pulling closer even as the world demanded we stay apart. And maybe that's why I couldn't stay away. Maybe that's why, when he called me into his office late one evening, my heart betrayed me before my mind could catch up. The blinds were half closed, the city skyline bleeding gold and crimson through the glass. He sat behind his desk, fingers drumming against a file, eyes locked on me with that same intensity one had tried so hard to forget. "Close the door, Ethan," he said, and God help me did. That was the moment I realized there's no undoing what had already begun. The night in the elevator wasn't an accident. It wasn't even weakness. It was a spark set to ignite, waiting for the right moment to burn us both alive. What I didn't know then was just how far the fire would spread. Because in America, love between two men in power isn't just a scandal, it's war. And we were both about to discover how much we were willing to sacrifice for a feeling we weren't even supposed to have. The city outside never sleeps. But sometimes, in those quiet stolen moments, I wished it did. I wished the world would just shut its eyes. Let us breathe. Let us exist without judgment. But that's not how this story goes. This story is about pain before peace, about breaking before healing. It's about how one night of weakness can unravel everything and yet, somehow, stitch you back together in ways you never imagined. And it all started with him. Alexander Hayes. My boss. My secret. My downfall. And maybe just maybe me salvation. The silence after I closed the door felt heavier than anything I'd ever carried in my life. The office was dim, lit only by the fading city glow, painting Alexander's features in shadows and fire. He didn't speak immediately, and that silence was torture. My chest tightened, my palms damp. I couldn't tell if I was about to get fired, kissed, or both. When his voice finally broke the quiet, it was low, deliberate. Do you know what you've done to me, Ethan? My throat went dry. Words hovered on my tongue, but nothing came out. My instinct screamed for me to run, to escape before the ground caved in beneath me. But my body stayed rooted to the floor, because even fear couldn't outweigh the pull of him. He rose from his chair slowly, his movements precise, like a predator circling prey. Yet there was no malice in his eyes, only a storm I couldn't decipher. That night, you think I've forgotten. You think I've been able to sit in meetings, shake hands, make decisions while pretending that your lips never touched mine. I felt my pulse in my ears. Alexander, don't. He cut me off, holding up a hand. Don't reduce it to a mistake. Don't tell me it was nothing. Because every time you walk into my office, every time you breathe near me, I know damn well it was everything. I should have denied it. I should have told him he was wrong. But lies stuck to my throat like barbed wire, and the truth slipped out before I could stop it. I haven't forgotten either. The air between us shifted, charged like the split second before a lightning strike. He closed the distance in 2 strides. His hand brushed against mine, not quite a touch, but close enough to send a current up my arm. His voice dropped to a whisper. Do you know what happens if anyone finds out? I nodded. Of course. I knew. His reputation, my career, everything we'd built it would all crumble. But even as the rational part of my brain screamed about consequences, my body betrayed me again, leaning closer, craving the warmth of him. It doesn't matter, I whispered. The moment those words left my lips, his restraint snapped. His mouth was on mine, fierce, desperate, like a dam finally breaking. The kiss wasn't soft, it was a clash of hunger and denial, of 2 men who had spent weeks pretending they didn't want this. His hands gripped my face, anchoring me, while mine fumbled against his chest, feeling the solid weight of a man I should never have touched. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless. His forehead rested against mine, his voice ragged. You're going to ruin me, Ethan. Maybe, I admitted, my chest rising and falling too fast. But you're going to ruin me too. The following days blurred into a whirlwind of stolen moments and dangerous glances. At work, we were back to our role: CEO and assistant, boss and subordinate. But behind closed doors, everything was different. It started small. A lingering touch when he handed me a file. A text message at midnight, still awake. A coffee cup placed on my desk with no note. But I knew it was from him. And then there were the nights. Nights where I found myself in his penthouse overlooking the city. Where the man who commanded boardrooms with an iron fist became someone entirely different. Vulnerable. Human. Mine. But secrecy is a heavy burden. And we carried it like a stone between us. Every smile had to be hidden. Every slip of the tongue corrected. Every excuse rehearsed in case anyone asked why his assistant spent too many hours in the office after dark. It was thrilling. It was intoxicating. It was hell. The breaking point came one Thursday afternoon. We were in a meeting with the executive team. The room filled with polished suits and polished lies. I was scribbling notes, pretending to focus, when I felt Ithis' gaze. I dared to glance up, and there it was, the smallest smirk playing at his lips, A private joke between us. No one else noticed. But I did. And it undid me. Later, when the meeting ended and the room emptied, I lingered, stacking papers with shaking hands. He approached me casually, as though the world wasn't spinning out of control. "Dinner tonight," he said softly, so only I could hear. "Alexander, we can't keep." He cut me off with a look, one that silenced the protests burning in my throat. 8 o'clock. My place. And just like that, resistance became impossible. That night, as I stood outside his apartment door, I wondered when exactly I had lost control. Maybe it was that first night in the elevator. Maybe it was the moment he said my name like it meant something more. Or maybe it was now, when I realized I didn't care about consequences anymore. He opened the door, dressed down in a gray sweater and jeans, and the sight nearly broke me, because Alexander Hayes wasn't supposed to look ordinary. He wasn't supposed to look approachable, soft, like a man who might actually belong to me. But he did. Dinner was untouched. We barely made it past the couch. And afterward, when the chaos quieted and I lay tangled in sheets that smelled like him, he whispered words that shattered me. "I don't want this to end, Ethan." I turned to face him, my chest aching. "Then don't let it." His hand brushed my cheek, his eyes unguarded. "You don't understand. I don't do this. I don't let people in. But you, damn it. You're under my skin, and I don't know how to get you out." "You don't have to," I murmured. For a moment, the world outside didn't exist. No rules. No consequences. Just us. But reality has a cruel way of intruding. The rumors started small. Whispers in the hallway. A glance that lasted too long. A raised eyebrow when I exited his office late at night. Corporate America feeds on gossip. And it didn't take long for people to notice cracks in the facade. One morning, I walked into the office and felt it immediately, the shift in the air. The way conversations hushed as I passed. My stomach twisted. Something was wrong. By noon, I knew what it was. A leaked photo. It wasn't explicit, but it didn't have to be. Just a blurred image of me and Alexander outside his building. Too close. Too familiar. Enough to spark speculation. Enough to set tongues wagging. I barged into his office, slamming the door behind me. "Someone knows." He didn't look surprised. In fact, he looked almost resigned. I was expecting this. Expecting it. "Alexander, this could ruin us." His jaw tightened. "No. Could ruin me. You'll walk away with a tarnished reputation at worst. I'm the one with a company to protect." The words stung sharper than I wanted to admit. "So what? Am I just collateral damage to you?" He stood, his expression dark. "Don't twist my words. You know what you mean to me." "Do I?" My voice cracked, anger and heartbreak colliding. "Because right now, it sounds like you're already preparing to let me go." Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Finally, he spoke, softer this time. "If it comes down to choosing between you and everything I've built," his voice faltered, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to choose you." The words shattered something inside me. I turned before he could see the tears burning in my eyes. "Then maybe I'll make the choice for you." And I walked out. The days that followed were agony. I threw myself into work, avoiding him as best I could. Though avoidance in a glass skyscraper only goes so far. We passed each other in hallways, exchanged clipped words in meetings, pretended we were nothing but professional. But every glance was a dagger, every silence a scream. At night, I lay awake replaying everything: his touch, his voice, the way his lips tasted when he said my name. and I hated myself for still wanting him, even as my heart ached from the possibility that maybe I was just another weakness he couldn't afford. But then came the charity gala. A black tie event, glittering chandeliers, champagne flowing like water. I hadn't planned on going, but duty demanded it. And there he was, Alexander Hayes, in a tuxedo, looking like sin incarnate. Our eyes met across the room, and it was like no time had passed at all. I tried to keep my distance. I tried to remind myself of the pain. But fate, once again, had other plans. Because halfway through the night, he found me, pulled me into a quiet corner, his hand firm on my arm, his voice raw. "I can't do this anymore," he confessed. "Do what?" I asked, my chest tight. "Pretend I don't want you. Pretend I can live without you." His eyes searched mine, desperate, pleading. "I don't care about the whispers. I don't care about the risk. Ethan, I choose you. God help me, I choose you." And just like that, the walls I'd built crumbled. Because for all the fear, for all the risk, there was one undeniable truth. I loved him. That night, as the gala sparkled on without us, Alexander Hayes kissed me again. And this time it wasn't desperation or weakness. It was something else. Something stronger. Something that felt a lot like forever. The morning after the gala felt different. Not lighter, not safer, but irrevocably changed. The choice had been spoken out loud, chose me. And though the world hadn't yet discovered the full truth, I knew it was only a matter of time. At his penthouse, sunlight spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting his skin in soft gold. Alexander sat at the edge of the bed, shoulders hunched, staring out at the skyline like a man at war with himself. His tuxedo jacket was draped over a chair, his bow tie discarded, his hair an untamed mess from my fingers. For a moment, I let myself simply look at him, the powerful CEO stripped of armor. Just a man who wanted, who feared, who needed. "You're staring," he muttered without turning. "Maybe I like what I see," I said, my voice still husky from the night. He turned then, his lips twitching into a faint smile, but his eyes betrayed the weight pressing on him. "Do you even know what you're asking for, Ethan? This isn't just love. It's a battlefield. Every decision I make, every deal I close, it's all under a microscope. And now, so are we." I sat up, sheets pooling around my waist. "Then let them look. I don't care anymore." "You should." His voice sharpened, almost desperate. "Because the moment this becomes public, they won't just come after me. They'll come after you. They'll question your credibility, your intentions. They'll paint you as nothing more than the assistant who slept his way into power." The words cut deep because I knew he was right. But love isn't logical, it doesn't weigh reputations or check resumes. It leaps, reckless and blind. "Maybe I don't care if the world misunderstands," I said quietly, "as long as you don't." For a long moment, silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken fears. And then he reached out, pulling me into his arms, his lips pressing against my temple. "You're going to break me," he whispered. "Or maybe I'll save you," I whispered back. But love in secret is fragile. And ours was a glass house already cracking under the pressure. The first real blow came during the quarterly board meeting. The room was filled with power men and women who wore ambition like armor and smelled blood from a mile away. I sat at the side, taking notes, my eyes flicking occasionally to Alexander at the head of the table. Halfway through a presentation, a voice cut through the air like a blade. "Mr. Hayes," said Richard Calloway, the oldest member of the board, his tone dripping with false politeness. "There have been whispers, questions about your professional judgment. care to address them. The room went still. Every head turned toward Alexander. His jaw tightened, but his voice was calm. If you have concerns, Richard, I suggest you be direct. Richard's smile was venomous. Very well. It seems some have noticed a closeness between you and your assistant. Late nights. Frequent private meetings. Surely, that's not cause for concern unless, of course, there's truth behind the gossip. My pen froze mid-sentence. My stomach dropped. Heat crept up my neck as 20 pairs of eyes darted toward me. Alexander didn't flinch. My assistant is dedicated and efficient. Any late nights are due to workload, not whatever story you're trying to spin. His tone was razor-sharp, final. But Richard's smirk lingered, and I knew this wasn't over. Afterward, in the privacy of his office, I slammed the door, pacing like a caged animal. They know, Alexander. They're circling. I handled it, he said, loosening his tie with a sigh. No, you deflected. There's a difference. I raked my hands through my hair, frustration burning in my chest. How long before deflecting isn't enough? How long before they demand proof? Before they decide I'm the weak link in your empire? He crossed the room in 2 strides, his hands gripping my shoulders. Listen to me. I built this company from nothing. I fought off sharks and vultures for years. Do you really think I'll let them take you from me that easily? His conviction should have reassured me, but instead, terrified me, because the more he fought for us, the greater the cost would be. Days turned into weeks, and the pressure mounted. Every glance in the office felt like suspicion. Every whispered conversation in the hallway sounded like a trap. The secrecy that once felt thrilling now felt suffocating. Yet, in the quiet of his penthouse, the world fell away. There. We weren't CEO and assistant. We weren't scandal and risk. We were just Alexander and Ethan, 2 men clinging to something real in a world built on lies. I remember one night vividly. Rain hammered against the windows. The city blurred into streaks of silver. I sat curled on the couch, exhaustion pulling at my bones. Alexander joined me, setting 2 glasses of whiskey on the table. You ever wonder, I asked softly, if it would have been easier if we'd never met? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached out, threading his fingers through mine. Every day, and every day, I thank God we did. Easy doesn't mean better, Ethan. Easy doesn't mean right. His words settled in my chest like a bomb, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to believe we could survive this. But survival has a price. The second blow came not from the board, but from the press. A headline splashed across digital screens and morning papers like a wildfire. Billionaire CEO's secret affair with young assistant. The article was brutal. Grainy photos. Speculation disguised as fact. Anonymous sources claiming impropriety. Painted me as a schemer, him as reckless, and us as a scandal worth tearing apart. By noon, my inbox was flooded with interview requests. My phone buzzed nonstop with messages from old friends, distant relatives, people I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly demanding answers. I wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. Instead, I found myself in Alexander's office. The newspaper spread across his desk. His face was carved from stone, his eyes burning. I'll sue them for defamation, he said coldly. Every last one of them. My throat was tight. It won't matter. The damage is done. They won't see lies. They'll see what they want to see: a rich man abusing his power and some kid too naive to know better. You're not naive, he snapped, slamming his fist against the desk. And I'll be damned if I let them reduce you to that. I flinched at his anger. Not because it was directed at me, but because I knew it was fueled by helplessness. For the first time, the mighty Alexander Hayes looked powerless. And I hated that I was the reason. That night, couldn't stay. I packed a small bag, ignoring his pleas, his promises, the desperate grip of his hand on mine. I need space, I said, tears choking my voice. I need to figure out who I am outside of this, before I drown in it. His eyes were wild, broken. Don't do this, Ethan. Don't leave me. I'm not leaving you, I whispered. I'm saving us. Because if I stay now, resentment will eat me alive. And then we'll have nothing. The look on his face as I walked out will haunt me forever. I moved into a small apartment across town. No penthouse views. No luxury, just four walls and silence. I told myself it was freedom. But every night I lay awake, reaching for a body that wasn't there. And yet, in that solitude, I found something I'd lost myself. I remembered the boy who moved to New York with nothing but ambition and a dream. The man who wanted to make a name on his own, not as someone's shadow. And slowly, painfully, I rebuilt the pieces of me that had been swallowed by Alexander's world. But love doesn't disappear just because you try to bury it. It lingers, it festers, it waits. And it waited for the night he showed up at my door. Rain slicked his hair to his forehead, his suit soaked through, his eyes wild. He didn't knock, he pounded, desperate, relentless, until I opened. Alexander, what are you? He cut me off, stepping inside, dripping water onto the floor. I can't do it, Ethan. I can't play the part anymore. I can't pretend the board matters more than you. I can't sleep in that empty bed one more night. I froze, heart racing. You shouldn't be here. Maybe not, he said, his voice breaking. But I am. Because wherever you are, that's where I'm supposed to be. Tears blurred my vision, the walls I'd built crumbling all over again. You don't get it. If we do this, we lose everything. His hand cupped my face, his thumb brushing away a tear. Then let it burn. Let them take the company, the money, the reputation. None of it means a damn thing without you. And in that moment, I believed him, because love like this isn't logical. It isn't safe. It's reckless, consuming, dangerous. And it was ours. The rain hadn't stopped. It hammered against the windows of my tiny apartment like the city itself was echoing the storm inside me. Alexander stood there, drenched and trembling, not from the cold, but from everything he carried. The empire, the scrutiny, the fear of losing me. And suddenly, none of it mattered. I pulled him in before logic could interfere, before fear could remind me why I'd left. His lips found mine with the desperation of a drowning man clinging to air. The kiss was messy, wet, rain mixing with tears I didn't realize were my own. When we finally broke apart, breathless, his forehead rested against mine. Tell me I'm not too late, he whispered, his voice raw. I closed my eyes, my chest aching. You're not. But if we do this again, Alexander, can't be halfway. No more pretending. No more hiding behind boardroom walls. I need all of you, or none. His grip tightened, as if letting go would mean losing everything. Then you'll have all of me, whatever it costs. We spent that night together not as CEO and assistant, not as a scandal waiting to explode, but as two men clinging to love like it was the only truth left in a world built on lies. The city faded. The whispers faded. Only us. But morning light is cruel. It always is. The moment I stepped outside, reality came crashing back. Paparazzi camped across the street. Cameras flashing like gunfire. Microphones shoved toward me. questions hurled like accusations. Are you sleeping with your boss? Is this an abuse of power? Are you in love with him? The noise was deafening. My pulse roared in my ears. I shoved through the crowd, heart pounding. But the damage was done. The photos would circulate by noon. My anonymity was gone. When I arrived at the office, whispers followed me like shadows. Every glance felt like judgment. Every smirk like a knife. And yet, when I entered Alexander's office, he looked at me like none of that mattered. His tie was already discarded. His sleeves rolled up, exhaustion lining his face. But when his eyes met mine, there was fire. They'll tear us apart, I said, closing the door behind me. Then let them try, he replied, defiance sharpening his tone. I won't lose you to them. The war began quietly. Subtle sabotage. Leaked documents. Anonymous complaints filed to HR, accusing Alexander of favoritism, of misconduct. They didn't care about truth, they cared about blood. I became the target. Colleagues who once smiled now sneered. Meetings I was excluded from. Projects pulled from my hands. It was death by 1,000 cuts. And I bled in silence, refusing to give them the satisfaction of breaking me. But Alexander noticed. Of course he did. One night, he stormed into my apartment, fury radiating off him. They think they can scare you into quitting. He spat, pacing like a caged animal. They think they can weaken me by breaking you. They don't realize you're my strength. His words should have comforted me. But instead, guilt clawed at my chest. Alexander, maybe they're right. Maybe I am your weakness. He froze, eyes narrowing. Don't you dare say that. I swallowed hard. If I walk away, if I cut this off, maybe they'll stop. Maybe they'll leave you alone. The look he gave me then could have split stone. Pain. Betrayal. Fear. If you walk away, Ethan, they win. And I lose more than just a company. I lose the only thing that matters. His voice cracked on the last word, and I realized something terrifying. For all his power, all his dominance, all his control, was just as scared of losing me as I was of losing him. And that fear bound us tighter than any secret ever could. But fear wasn't the only battle we had to fight. The board escalated. They demanded Alexander step aside for the good of the company, citing the scandal as evidence of compromised judgment. The vote was scheduled for Friday. The days leading up to it were hell. Lawyers called. Journalists camped outside. Anonymous threats slipped under doors. And through it all, Alexander remained steadfast, a man refusing to bow. But I saw the cracks, the sleepless nights, the weight on his shoulders, the way he stared at his reflection like he didn't recognize the man staring back. Thursday night, I found him in his office, hunched over papers, his tie discarded, his whiskey glass untouched. You can't keep doing this, I said softly. He didn't look up. I don't have a choice. Yes, you do, I argued, crossing the room. You can let it go. The company, the board, all of it. Walk away before it destroys you. His eyes lifted, burning into mine. And do what, Ethan? Sit in some quiet house while they call me a coward. Watch them strip everything I built piece by piece. I cupped his face, forcing him to see me. No. You'd sit in that house with me. And maybe, for once, you'd actually be free. For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then his lips pressed against mine, desperate and trembling. You don't understand. You are the only freedom I've ever had. Friday came like a guillotine. The boardroom was tense. Every seat filled with vultures dressed in silk and ambition. The air reeked of power plays and betrayal. I wasn't supposed to be there, but Alexander insisted. If they want to destroy me, they'll have to look you in the eye while they do it. The vote began. One by one, voices cast judgment. Words like scandal and reputation and liability filled the air. Each one was a dagger, each one slicing away at the empire Alexander had built. When it was Richard Calloway's turn, he smirked, his voice dripping poison. With all due respect, Mr. Hayes, your personal entanglements have compromised your ability to lead. This company deserves better. The final tally loomed. Alexander's removal was one vote away. And then stood. I won't beg for my seat, he said, his voice steady, echoing through the chamber. I won't grovel to men who hide their own sins behind closed doors. But I will tell you this, I have built this company with my blood, my sweat, my soul. And if you believe a man's worth is determined by who he loves, then maybe it's not me who has failed. Maybe it's all of you. The room erupted gasps, whispers, outrage. And in that chaos, I realized something. No matter the outcome of the vote, we had already won. Because Alexander Hayes had chosen love over power. That night, we didn't celebrate. We didn't mourn. We simply held each other in silence, listening to the city hum outside. The world could brand a scandal. The board could strip him of titles. The press could twist our story. But in that quiet, with his heart beating against mine, I knew the truth. We weren't weakness. We weren't mistake. We were survival. We were love. And love real lovius, the only empire worth keeping. The Monday after the vote, the world looked the same. The skyscrapers still reached for the clouds. Taxis still honked in endless traffic. And New Yorkers still rushed down sidewalks with coffee in hand. But for Alexander, everything had shifted. He was no longer CEO. The empire he had built was stripped from him with a single decision. Headlines called it the fall of Hayes. Some cheered. Some pitted. Some mocked. The board got what they wanted. The press feasted. And yet, when I found him on my couch in that tiny apartment, wearing sweatpants instead of Armani, a mug of coffee in hand instead of $1 million contract, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Peace. It wasn't loud or triumphant. It was quiet, fragile, like the first breath after drowning. He looked at me, his lips twitching into the smallest smile. You're staring again. I smirked. Get used to it. You're not my boss anymore. I don't have to pretend. He chuckled, shaking his head. God, you're going to be the death of me. Or the reason you finally live. I shot back. The weeks that followed were strange. Without the company consuming his every waking hour, Alexander wandered aimlessly at first. He spent mornings reading newspapers, afternoons pacing, evenings with me. He tried to pretend it didn't bother him. But I saw the ache of a man who had lost not just a job, but an identity. One night, as we lay tangled in bed, he admitted it. I don't know who I am without it. He whispered into the dark. Hayes Industries was me. Every headline, every deal, every success, it was all I had. And now, I turned toward him, pressing my hand to his chest. Now you have me. Isn't that enough? He kissed my forehead softly. It's more than enough. I don't know how to be this man. The one who doesn't have to fight every day. Then maybe, I said gently, this is your chance to find out. Slowly, he did. We took walks in Central Park without bodyguards trailing behind. We cooked dinners together, burned pasta, unevenly chopped vegetables, laughter echoing in my tiny kitchen. He learned to do laundry for the first time in years, grumbling at the confusing buttons while I teased him mercilessly. For the first time, he lived, not as a CEO, not as an empire, just as Alexander. And I loved him more in those moments than I ever had when he was on top of the corporate world. But love doesn't erase wounds. One evening, I came home to find him sitting on the floor, papers scattered around him, old contracts, clippings, photos from his early days building the company. His hands shook as he held a photo of his younger self, standing in front of the First Hayes Industries office. "They took it all," he said, voice hollow. "Everything I sacrificed for, gone. And I can't help but wonder if I failed. If I chose you, and it cost me everything." The words stung, though I knew he didn't mean them as blame. Still, my chest tightened. "If you regret me," his head snapped up. "I's fierce. Never. Don't you dare think that. You're the only thing I don't regret. You're the reason I'm still standing." He pulled me into his arms, his voice breaking. "But I don't know how to stop feeling like I lost." I kissed him hard, tasting the salt of his tears. "Then let's build something new. Not for them. Not for the board. For us." And we did. It started small. A consulting gig here, project there. Alexander discovered he had more to offer than running an empire. He had wisdom, strategy, experience. People still wanted him, but now on his terms. And me, I finally stepped out of his shadow. I pursued my own career, one that wasn't defined by being the assistant. I found my voice in marketing, landing a job at a small but promising firm. We supported each other, challenged each other, loved each other through the uncertainty. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, we healed. The turning point came one spring afternoon. We were walking through the farmer's market, hands brushing, the scent of fresh bread and flowers in the air. An older woman selling apples looked at us, smiling warmly. "You two make a lovely couple," she said. For a moment, both of us froze. My stomach knotted, instinct screaming to pull away, to hide. Years of secrecy had wired me to fear discovery. But Alexander didn't let go. He squeezed my hand tighter, smiled at the woman, and replied, "Thank you. He's the best thing that's ever happened to me." And just like that, the fear cracked, because the world didn't end. The sky didn't fall. A stranger saw us, and instead of judgment, there was kindness. It was small, but it was everything. From then on, we stopped hiding. We held hands in public. We kissed on park benches. We lived like we deserved to love without apology. Some people stared. Some whispered. But others smiled. And we learned that those smiles mattered more than the whispers. The scandal faded with time, replaced by new headlines, new scandals, new faces for the world to devour. The world moved on. And so did we. A year later, we stood on a beach in Cape Cod, the ocean stretching endless before us. The wind whipped through Alexander's hair, the salt air stinging my skin. He turned to me, eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. From his pocket, he pulled a small velvet box. My breath caught. "Ethan Miller," he said, his voice trembling just enough to undo me. "You walked into my life when I least expected it. You tore down walls I thought were indestructible. You saw Menet the CEO, not the empire, just me. And for the first time in my life, I felt free." Tears blurred my vision. He dropped to one knee, opening the box to reveal a simple silver band. "I don't need Hayes Industries. I don't need power or headlines. All I need is you. Will you marry me?" I laughed through tears, nodding so hard I thought my head might fall off. "Yes. God, yes." He slid the ring onto my finger, and the ocean roared behind us, as if the world itself was applauding. And when he kissed me, I knew this wasn't just survival anymore. This was forever. Epilogue. Years later, I sometimes think back to that night in the elevator, the night everything began. A single moment of weakness. A kiss we weren't supposed to share. And I realize no, it was never weakness. It was fate. Because that night gave me the love of my life. The man who taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness. That power isn't measured in boardrooms. And that love real, messy, reckless love is the strongest empire of all. And every morning, when I wake up to Alexander's arms around me, I thank fate for that moment. Because I wouldn't change it for the world. Marriage didn't change us in the way people said it would. There were no sudden fireworks or instant answers to the struggles we had carried. What it did bring was something quieter, stronger, an anchor. Promise that no matter how heavy the storm, we had chosen to face it together. The wedding itself was small, intimate, just a handful of friends who had stood by us. A windswept beach, and vows spoken against the crash of the ocean. Alexander looked devastatingly beautiful in his simple gray suit, his eyes shining with tears he didn't bother to hide. When he said, "I do," it felt like more than just a vow, it was a redemption. A declaration that he had finally allowed himself to love without fear. And me? I looked at him and knew that I was exactly where I was meant to be. Life after wasn't always easy. People didn't just forget the scandal. There were still whispers, still looks, still those who believed our love story was one of manipulation and recklessness. But those voices grew quieter with time, drowned out by the rhythm of a life we built. Alexander never went back to Hayes Industries. The company, once his identity, was now just a name on a skyscraper we sometimes passed by on late-night walks. At first, it stung. He would look at the building with a flicker of something lost. Regret, but then his hand would tighten around mine. And I knew where his true empire lay. He poured his energy into consulting, mentoring young entrepreneurs who reminded him of himself in his early years. Only this time, he wasn't chasing headlines or board approval. He was chasing impact, purpose. I flourished, too. At the marketing firm, I earned respect not because of who I loved but because of what I brought to the table. Campaigns I created turned into successes. And slowly, I stepped out of the shadow of being the assistant and into the light of being Ethan Miller, someone worth noticing on his own. We grew, not as fragments trying to survive, but as men finally free. But marriage is never just growth, it's compromise. And sometimes, compromise means facing the parts of yourself you'd rather keep hidden. One evening, months after our wedding, we sat at the kitchen table. Bills scattered between us. Alexander hated budgeting, spent a lifetime with endless resources. I hated confrontation, I'd spent a lifetime avoiding conflict. I told you, I said carefully, we can't keep living like we have unlimited funds. The penthouse dinners, the spontaneous getaways, it's too much. He leaned back. Frustration etched across his face. I built a life where I didn't have to think about limits. And now I feel like every decision is shackled. My heart ached at the honesty. But I didn't back down. We're not shackled. We're just human. And maybe being human isn't a downgrade. Maybe it's what we needed all along. He looked at me for a long time, his anger fading into something softer. You're right. But damn, it's hard to let go of who I was. I reached across the table, taking his hand. You're not less without the empire. You're more. You're mine. And in that moment, the tension broke. Because love isn't about never fighting, it's about fighting and still choosing to stay. The years passed. Seasons changed. Our love deepened, softened, grew roots. We moved out of the tiny apartment and into a townhouse in Brooklyn. It wasn't flashy, but it was ours. We painted the walls together, arguing over colors until we landed on shades that felt like compromise. We filled it with books, laughter, the smell of coffee on slow mornings. Neighbors knew us as Alex and Ethan, the couple with the dog that barks too much. We adopted a golden retriever. Charlie Ho promptly took over the bed and our lives. He was messy, loud, and perfect. And sometimes, when I'd catch Alexander crouched on the floor, wrestling with Charlie, his laughter echoing through the house, I'd realize just how far we'd come. From boardrooms and scandals to this domestic, ordinary, extraordinary love. One winter evening, as snow dusted the city, Alexander and I walked hand in hand down a quiet street. Holiday lights blinked in windows. Carols drifted faintly through the air. "Do you ever miss it?" I asked, glancing at him. "The company." He shrugged. "Sometimes. But then I look at you, at us, and I realize I traded power for peace. And I'd make that trade 1,000 times again." I smiled, leaning against him as our breaths fogged in the cold. "You've changed." "So have you," he said, pressing a kiss to my hair. "And thank God for it." We stopped in front of a toy store window, where children's faces pressed against the glass, eyes wide with wonder. Alexander's hand slipped into mine, squeezing gently. "You ever think about—" His voice trailed off, but I knew what he meant. "About kids?" I asked softly. He nodded, his expression vulnerable in a way I rarely saw. "I used to think I'd be too selfish, too consumed with work. But now, maybe we could give someone the kind of life we never had." I smiled, heart swelling. "One day, when we're ready." And for the first time, the future felt wide open, not as a threat, but as a promise. Years later, that promise became reality. We adopted a little boy, 6 years old, with curious eyes and a smile that melted even Alexander's sharpest edges. His name was Noah, and from the moment he walked into our home, he was ours. Parenthood wasn't easy. Nights of tears, mornings of chaos, endless messes. But it was beautiful. Watching Alexander, once a man consumed by ambition, kneel to tie Noah's shoelaces or read him a bedtime story, I realized he had finally found the one title no board could ever give him: Dad. And me. I found myself in the quiet moments helping with homework at the kitchen table, listening to Noah's endless stories, tucking him in at night. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't headline-worthy. But it was everything. Sometimes, late at night, after Noah was asleep and Charlie snored at our feet, Alexander and I would sit on the porch, glasses of wine in hand, watching the stars. "Do you ever think," he'd ask, "about how different things would have been if we hadn't been stuck in that elevator?" I always laughed softly. We probably would have spent years pretending, circling each other, never brave enough to admit what we felt. He'd smile, reaching for my hand. Then maybe fate knew what it was doing. "Fate or weakness?" I teased. "Not weakness," he corrected, his eyes tender. "Never weakness." That night was the first time I was strong enough to let someone in. And in those moments, with the stars above and the man I loved beside me, I knew the truth. Our story wasn't about scandal or loss. It wasn't about power or downfall. It was about love, messy, fragile, resilient love. A love that survived whispers, boardrooms, headlines. A love that rebuilt itself from ashes. A love that turned weakness into strength. The final chapter of our story hasn't been written yet. Maybe it never will be, because love doesn't end, it evolves. But if I could go back, if I could warn my younger self standing in that elevator on that fated night, I wouldn't tell him to walk away. I'd tell him to hold on. Because just one moment of weakness gave me a lifetime of strength. And his name is Alexander Hayes. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.